One of the biggest storylines going into the 23-24 OHL season was the Brantford Bulldogs. They made the move from Hamilton to Brantford, and we're wondering how would the whole transition go with being in the new community, a different rink, and it turns out it was quite successful. It's the return of OHL hockey in over 40 years. The last team, of course, the Brantford Alexanders. So you fast forward 40 years, and the fans in Brantford, they have embraced the Bulldogs with arms wide open. And it was a successful first season. I'm sure, we could have seen this team go maybe a little deeper in the postseason, but all things considered, this Brantford Bulldogs team looks like they're here to stay. And of course, off the ice, the city of Brantford in the process of building a brand new 5,000 seat arena to keep OHL hockey in the telephone city. And even the owner, Michael Anlauer, saying if you build it, they'll stay. And so a very promising future right now for the Brantford Bulldogs. But let's look at how this season went, because at the start of the year, it was a very slow start for Brantford. They struggled a little bit out of the gate, but once they started getting their rhythms and their gameplay figured out, this Brantford team really poured it on, and it really started with the play of Nick Lardis. Nick Lardis was outstanding to start this season, but then went down with injury in December. And at first, it sounded like it was just maybe a day-to-day problem, but it ended up being for the rest of the regular season. So players like Florian Jacki, Merrick Van Acker, Patrick Thomas really had to step up to keep the Bulldogs competitive in the very tight Eastern Conference race. And at the OHL trade deadline, they made some big moves, sending Jorian Donovan to Saginaw and then Noah Van Vliet up to Sudbury. And it seemed like they were maybe selling at that point, but they got the picks and also Owen Protz from the Sudbury Wolves. Then they picked up Zachary Lavoie and Daniel Zobelev from the Niagara Ice Dogs and kept this Bulldogs team quite competitive. I really like the pickup of Zachary Lavoie. He seemed to excel as soon as he played with the Brantford Bulldogs, and that was able to help them stay competitive and finish third in the Eastern Conference standings and would end up playing the Ottawa 67s in the playoffs. And just with how tight the Eastern Conference was between first and sixth, ended up the 67s would win that first round series in 6 games. So I'm sure it was a little disappointing for fans to see the third seed fall in the first round, but goes to show just how close and the parity that we saw in the Eastern Conference. So even though they didn't go too far in the playoffs this season, I'm sure you can see this as a successful year for Brantford in the OHL. Let's look at the top 10 scorers from the regular season. Merrick Van Acker led the way, 36 goals, 46 assists, good for 82 points. And of course, Van Acker's name climbing on the North American Central Scouting list, projected now to be maybe a late first, early second round pick at the NHL draft in June. So Van Acker doing a fantastic job with this Bulldogs team. Second in scoring, Patrick Thomas, 21 goals, 45 assists, 66 points. Florian Jacki, who signed his NHL entry-level contract with the Montreal Canadiens, he had 34 goals, 31 assists, 65 points on the year. Not bad for a free agent signing for this Bulldogs organization. Fourth in scoring was rookie forward Jake O'Brien, 13 goals, 51 assists, good for 64 points. O'Brien, I'm sure, being considered as rookie of the year. Him, Robrick with Niagara, Riley Patterson for the Barrie Colts, and Carter George, the Owen Sound Attack. I feel like those are four solid candidates for Rookie of the Year, and Jake O'Brien doing a great job there in his first year with the Brantford Bulldogs. And then you have Zachary Lavoie. He was fifth in scoring, 31 goals, 24 assists, 55 points on the season. But with Brantford, he ended up getting 18 goals, 16 assists, 34 points. So he excelled in that trade from Niagara to Brantford. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes next with his career. He can return next year as an overager, and I think that would be pretty big for Brantford to keep Lavoie going into next season. Nick Lardis is next on the scoring chart. He had 29 goals, 21 assists, 50 points on the season, and that was just in 37 games. That just goes to show how much of a great player Nick Lardis is. Of course, he's a Chicago Blackhawks prospect. I expect big things from him going forward. Nick Lardis, a great player at the junior level, and even had a solid showing in the playoffs in that first round against the Ottawa 67s, because it seemed like there was a chance that he may not play in the postseason, but it is playoff time, and players they will usually play through injury. And Nick Lardis, I think he scored 2 goals in Game 1 against the 67s to make his presence known. So Nick Lardis, an outstanding player at the Bulldogs, and still got the job done, even though his season was cut short. Ben Bujaud, he's next in scoring, 14 goals, 26 assists, good for 40 points. Cole Brown, 8th in scoring. He had 16 goals, 23 assists, 39 points. And then Lawson Shirk, 11 goals, 17 assists, 28 points. And Calvin Karambi, 10th in scoring for Brantford. He had 14 goals, 12 assists, good for 26 points. Goaltending-wise, Mateo Drobak, I feel, is probably one of the more underrated goalies in the Ontario Hockey League. He had a record of 28, 14, 7, and 2 during the regular season, a 3.27 goals against average, and an 892 save percentage. So some pretty good numbers there for Brantford. And then David Igorov, the rookie goaltender, 9, 6, and 2 was his record. He had a 3.86 goals against average and an 870 save percentage. So not too bad for Igorov in his first full season with the Bulldogs. Now, overagers that are graduating this year, Lawson Shirk, Daniel Sobovlev, and Mateo Drobak. So some key pieces leaving the lineup, especially with Drobak, who has played the bulk of the games this year for the Brantford Bulldogs. Now, the overage candidates for next season, that includes Zachary Lavoie, Florian Jacki, of course, a Montreal Canadiens prospect, Adrian Robello, Ben Bujaud, Patrick Thomas, who's a Washington Capitals prospect, Thomas Halmara, who is an import, so if you keep him, he's going to take an import spot as well as an overage, and then Cedrickson Okatundu. So some big decisions to be made with the Brantford Bulldogs going forward. Who do you keep as your overagers? You have to figure Zachary Lavoie is a for sure that you would like to have in your lineup, but then Florian Jacki, he brings that sandpaper to the game. So if he doesn't stick with Montreal, then maybe he'll be your number 2 overager. But still, Thomas Halmara, a very skilled defenseman. He's an Ottawa Senators prospect. He did miss significant time due to injury. So I think Halmara will also be an interesting player to look at going forward with the Brantford Bulldogs. Now, I think this team, it should be a competitive season next year going into 2024-25, but goaltending will be the big question mark. Is Igorov, ready to be that number 1 goaltender for the Brantford Bulldogs next season? He's got some decent numbers, but Drobak played the bulk of the game, so maybe Brantford will look to add another goaltender just in case Igorov isn't quite ready to be a starter with the Brantford Bulldogs. But still, I think this is a Brantford team that should compete yet again. That East Division, it might come down again between Oshawa, Brantford. Kingston should also be better next year in that East Division. So it's going to be interesting to see how the East will play out. But still, I think there's a lot of excitement still around this Brantford Bulldogs team. We should find out in the fall what the next steps are when it comes to the new arena in the city of Brantford. And if you haven't been able to go to a game at the Civic Center in Brantford, you should definitely do that. It's a smaller environment. It's a smaller rink. It's very intimate. And just the passion that fans in Brantford have, it is fun to take in. Even if you're an opposing fan, it's definitely worth a watch there. So that's how I see the Brantford Bulldogs. That's my view from the booth. Let me know your comments down below, your thoughts on the Brantford Bulldogs moving forward. Do you think this team's going to be not exciting, but competitive in the Eastern Conference again next year? And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll talk to you again soon.